Buongiorno.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Valeria di Cosmo, an associated professor at the University of Turin, of course, the Department of Economics and Statistics, and I have the great pleasure to have Rachel and Ngai with us today. As you probably know, she comes from the London School of Economics. She's a professor of economics there, one of the most prestigious universities, not only in Europe, but all over the world. Rachel deals with macro economics, labor market and gender issues, and also housing issues. So besides being a professor at the London School of Economics, she also deals with issues like policies and applied economics as the CPR, that is a non-profit organization whose goal is to inform the politicians and also to make analyses that are then provided to politicians all over the world. In addition to her research activities, she also promotes and disseminates the results of her work also to non-specialized public. She has different podcasts, and then she publishes articles on Vox.eu that is very similar to the Italian La Voce.info. So basically it's a website that allows all researchers, whenever they have some significant papers, to disseminate basically the result, the data of their researchers to the wide public. Other important things to say, and then of course, without further ado, I will give her the floor. So basically, another important thing is to mention her extremely prolific scientific activity. She publishes articles, papers in the most important macroeconomic journals in the world. So today she will be speaking about brilliant but sitting on a bench, the potential, the unexploited potential of women of the Gen Z. So basically she's going to explain the reason why, despite young women are more and more educated and they have important qualifications, unfortunately they are not suitably valued by the labor market. So Rachel will be speaking for 40 minutes, and then there will be around 15 minutes of Q&A, and I'm pretty sure that there will be lots of questions by the public, and we encourage you to ask your questions. So now I would like to give the floor to Rachel.
Very much. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be back. I was here 3 years ago. So this year I was asked to talk about young people in the labor market. I think I made one mistake to put woman in the title, and as a result, I can see most of the audience are women. But this is really a talk that a man should listen to as well. So let's see what I see as one of the important topics about young people in the labor market. So I picked this title, Brilliant but Benched, the Untapped Potential of Gen Z Women. So what is it about? It's it's based on the research that I have with a Gen Z woman. She's a PhD student in Cambridge University. And the slides has the help with one of the youngest Gen Z, born in 2012, which is my son. He helped me to do the slides. So the first two figures is dedicated by him. So I'm going to focus on young people in the OECD country. And I wanted to point out one thing that really troubled me, and I don't have a good explanation, but I wanted to share with you. Maybe some of you can tell me the reason why this is true. And what I see in the data is that young women, they are getting more educated than older generation, and they are more educated than young men. But for some reason, they're not working as much, and if they work, they earn less. And I wanted to examine some of the role that could be played by policy and gender norm. Okay, so that's basically what the talk is. So first, the talk will be 3 sets. First, I'm going to talk about the phenomenon. Then I wanted to point out one important consideration, which is family and work. Then I'm coming to some of the factors. Okay, so let's look at some numbers. So there will be very few words on the slides, but there will be a lot of picture. So I hope the audience in the back can see the picture easily. If not, I will try to translate what each picture means. So the first picture is about young women getting more educated. Now, on the x-axis, there are 38 OECD countries, and there are 2 dots. One dot is the share of women with a bachelor degree for the age 25 to 34 years old. The other dot is for the age 55 to 64 years old. So the 2 dots distance basically tell you how much more young woman is educated compared to the previous generation. Okay? So the blue dot is the young woman. The red dot is the previous generation. So if the blue dot is very high than the red dot, that means there's lots of improvement in young women's education. Now, I rank the country according to how educated are their young women. Okay, so you can see in the OECD, the most educated young women are in Korea. Okay, so that is the most educated. And on the left is the one that with the lowest education. So what we see from this picture is, in all 38 OECD countries, young women are getting much more educated compared to the previous generation. Okay? Now, and there's an OECD average number. So on average, young women, more than half of the young women have a college degree. Compared to the previous generation, only 32%. Okay? Now, the next picture is about comparing young women with young men. This time, I have 3 dots. Each dot represents a year. So it's 2007, 2015, and 2023. And what that dot represents, for example, the green dot will tell you in 2023, how much more is women more educated than men. Okay? So if you take Korea, that number is about 15%. So that means that a 15% more young women have a college degree compared to young men in Korea. Okay, in 2023. Now, if you look, the line 0, okay, 0 is there, you see? So that means almost in all countries in 2023, woman is more educated than men, in all of them. In some are pretty high, okay? In some, woman is like 25%, like in Iceland, woman is 25% more likely to have a college degree than men. And this is not new in a sense. Even in 2007, women are more likely than men to have a college degree. Okay? But it's just that the gap has been increasing a bit. Okay, so now it's even more likely a young woman will have a college degree compared to men. And the difference is quite big. Now, Italy is down here. So even in Italy, woman is more than 10% more likely than men to have a college degree. Okay? So then you think about, what is education for? Now, of course, we can like education. We can enjoy going to school. It could be some, preferences, utility. People like learning. But from an economic point of view, most of the time we think of education as you're making an investment, okay? Because you have to pay tuition, you have to pay your time costs, and you're waiting to improve your human capital so that in the future you earn more in terms of salary. So in other words, the economic return of education is very much related to you working and getting a salary. Okay, so that is the logic of it. But are they really? Are young women really working more and earning more? So first, let's look at young women versus the previous generation. Okay, it's true compared to the previous generation, the blue dot is the young woman, the red dot is the previous generation. Compared to previous generation, woman is catching up with the man. Now, this blue dot is the young woman. How is their employment rate compared to men? As you can see, 0 is up there. So that means in all countries, at all time, woman is working less than men. Okay? There's some improvement of this generation compared to previous generation. Even in the very highly educated Korea, okay, remember woman is much more educated than men and they have very high college degree, like 76% of them has a college degree, and still their employment rate is below men, okay? Now, if you compare young women with a college degree and without a college degree, because that's what we're talking about, right? They go to school, they wanted to use their education, so they should be working. And what do we see? The blue dot is women with a college degree, the red is without college degree. So now I'm comparing the gender employment gap for people who have college degree and for just overall population. It's true, having an education, the blue dot, made the gap smaller. Okay? You're moving up to the line 0 compared to without college degree. Without a college degree, the gap can be quite big. But still, if you look at all countries, only in one country, which is Portugal, surprisingly, women with education actually have slightly higher employment rate than men. Otherwise, in all countries, with or without a college degree, women are still less likely to be employed. Okay? Now, these are some ballpark number telling you all degree of education. So in all degree of education, for all age, women are less likely to be employed. Having education, the younger generation is slightly better than the older generation in some dimension if they have a college degree. But remember, this is OECD average. So sometimes the average really depends on how some country can be more or less. So now if you look at women's earning, okay? Yeah, so the women's earning, so again, these are average. So they're not working more, and if they work, they also tend to earn less. And this earning is quite robustly like a 20% discount. It's like when a woman works, they get a 20% discount on their earning. Again, these are average number. So I'm going to look at the same ranking of country. Remember, this ranking is according to the share of women with a college degree in 2023 in this country. Remember, Korea is the top. Still, at the individual country level, you can see still that young women with a college degree, they are doing slightly better than previous generation. So the blue dot is above the orange dot, but still is below 0. Meaning that still they are earning much less than men. Okay? And these numbers are quite substantial. So the 20% is the OECD average, and some of them, you know, for the whole population, is much below that. So today's young women are making improvement. Okay? They are earning a little bit more. They are catching up with the man, but still is below. Okay? So then you say, okay, why isn't women working? Okay? Let's first look at overall women. Okay? So this sort of attitude. Is it because the society don't want them to work? So here is a survey question from the ILO, which is an international labor organization. They asked about 142 countries. They asked men and women above age 15. So here's the question that is being asked. Do you agree it is perfectly acceptable for any woman in your family to have a paid job outside the home if she wants one? Okay? And the answer is surprisingly positive. Whether it's men or women, 80% of them say yes. If they want one, they should. And then if you only look at the rich country, it's about 100%. Okay, so we are quite civilized. If a woman wants a job, they should. So then why not? Why didn't they work? Well, then they ask them again, so what do you think why they don't work? Okay, you agree they should work, so why don't they? And the survey tells you, whether it's man or woman, they both would say it's because family and work balance. It's very hard for a woman to balance family and work. Number two is the same, affordable care, meaning, is it affordable to send someone I have to look after to outside? So that seems to be one of the main reasons why people think women do not work. And then you can now look at more detail about how important is this so-called care responsibility. So care responsibility here basically means care for the home. It could be doing household work, cooking, cleaning, or childcare, or looking after, sick family member. All these are care responsibility. So the most recent ILO report tells you that about 748 million people were not in the labor force because of the care responsibility. And out of these 750 million people, 700 million are women. Okay? So almost all of them are women who say that they cannot work because of the care responsibility. Now you can go to individual reason that is being given. When you compare men and women, 45% of women will say they will not work because of the care responsibility. Men will mostly quote other reason. Maybe there's personal reason, maybe there's health or whatever. But for women, it's the care responsibility. You can look at it by continent. You will still see the answer, care responsibility, is one of the most important things for women compared to men. And then you can also look at it compared in terms of education level. Even people with very high education, with a college degree, woman is still more likely than man to say, I'm not working because of the care responsibility. Okay? And so, about the care responsibility, there's one item that it comes very important, and that will relate it to something that I will talk about later as well, which is children. Okay? So one of the main things about many women say they cannot balance very often is to do with children. There's a large literature talking about so-called child penalty. So basically, when we look at that earning feature, why women earn less than men, many economists concluded that it's because these are women with children, and there's a child penalty. So there's a large literature, and recent literature use a new technique called the event study. And they basically look at what happened to men and women's employment and earning after the first child being born. Okay? And they produce this amazing world map, which basically tells you that in a lot of countries, so this color, the darker is the color, the more severe is the child penalty. The highest number can be about 40%. Okay, that will be the darkest number. Even if we look at Europe here, there's still very substantial child penalty. Okay? So there is some reason going out there. In this event study, they find out that after the first child, women's employment become persistently lower, and they earn less, and that tends to be quite persistent. So then we bring to, let's look inside. What is it about women and children and family? That brings to an economic concept, something that we all know, which is called home production. Okay? I think these days both men and women know what they mean by home production, especially after COVID. Okay? Home production is things that you do for the family. Okay? You produce a clean home, cook food, and caring, all this kind of thing you do for the family. Okay? So this is a book called The Economics of Household Production. Very well-written book and very forward-looking, written 100 years ago. So she defined, Margaret Reed, she defined what is home production, but then she added something very positive. She said, as time went on, one form of production after another, okay? Now this is written in 1934. So back then, home production includes things that we don't do anymore, such as spinning, weaving, canning food, all these kind of home production. One by one, they've been transferred to commercial production, meaning that you don't make your sweater anymore, you buy it in the market. You don't make your canned food anymore, you buy it in the market. And then she said, in 1934, she said, in addition, childcare, education, and care of the sick are now to a large extent carried on by paid worker. That was very surprising, isn't it? This is in 1934. She is an optimist, okay? Because what we have just looked at the ILO document is, in 2023, still that wasn't done. Okay? So home production is basically, it can be done by paid worker, so you can marketize. And the time you spend on home production is work. Okay? It's different from leisure. Leisure, you spend the time you devote to it, like watching TV. You wouldn't want to hire someone to watch TV for you. Whereas home production, you enjoy the output. You want to have a nice bowl of pasta. But cooking the pasta every day might not be as enjoyable as just cooking for fun. Okay, so that's the key difference. And if you look at it, how is home production being done? Well, it's done by a household member, man and woman. It can be done by household appliance. Okay, back then, 100 years ago, they spent a long time washing clothes. Now we can just put things in the washing machine, so it can mechanize. Or it can be outsourced to the market, okay? So it can be, you hire a nanny, you hire a cleaner, you go to restaurant, or like I have stopped going to supermarket now because I do all my shopping on my phone, and then they deliver for me, okay? So these are how home production done. So let's look at the time people put in home production by gender. Now, when you look at this number, what did I do? I already take the hours done by women divided by the hours done by men. So on average, you can think of, so this is the last column, so this average means average across all countries. So that means for every 1 hour, men work in the market, women work 0.7 hour. For every 1 hour, men work in the home production, women do 2 hours. That's the average. Maximum is a country where it has the maximum hours. So in some country, for every 1 hour, a man work at home, cleaning, cooking, women do 4 hours. So what we see from this table is that total amount of work, meaning market work and home work, is quite similar across gender. But the distribution is very different. For some reason, women has to do more homework compared to the market work. Now, this is the most astonishing picture I've seen out of all these OECD countries with time use survey. On the x-axis, I plot for every 1 hour men do, how many hours women do at home. On the y-axis, I plot for every 1 hour men do in the market, how many hours women do. And you can see a very clear negative relationship, meaning that in country where women do more at the home, they also do less in the market. And you can also see countries standing out. On the very end is Japan, Korea, and Turkey. Okay? But remember, they are quite different. Japan and Korea, they're the one with most highly educated young women. On this side, to the left, where is more equal distribution of market and home, where do you see? Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland. These are the countries that has very, very, direct government policy in helping the care sector. Okay? And then we will see more. Now let's look at the United States, where I can get some data over time. Okay? We can sort of see how this pattern change over time for one country. So this is for the US. On the x-axis, it's just a year. On the y-axis is, for every 1 hour men do at home, how many hours women do. So the good news we see from here is the orange line is declining. Okay? So as the economy develop, we see that the gap at home is actually converging. So now in US, for every 1 hour men do, women do less than 2 hours. And this is sort of mirrored by an increase in the market. So as women do less at home, they also started to do more in the market. Whereas Japan and Korea? Japan and Korea is more like the 1960s in the US in terms of distribution of work. But what is really surprising is the Japan and Korean home, they have washing machine, they have lots of appliances compared to the 1960 United States. And these women are much more educated, not just in level, but also relative to men. So that is quite surprising. Now, if you look at how the hour itself has changed, so before we plot the ratio, now we put the level. So this tells you that every week, men will spend about 42 hours in the market getting paid. Okay? Whereas women spend about 10 hours in the market getting paid in 1965. So what we see is this orange line and the red line are really reversing. So as women is spending less time in the market, in the home, they now actually work more in the market. Okay? That is quite astonishing. So somehow there's some way you could turn the hours that they do just at home to them getting a job outside. Now, why is this very important, what I call marketization? You can also see it in terms of the output that is being produced. So basic thing in economics, we hear in the radio, in the news all the time, is GDP. We always hear GDP. So GDP basically measures how much goods and service is produced in the market. And the US BEA, Bureau of Economic Analysis, publish it. Okay? And that's how much we produce in the market. And we know that in 2020, it's about 20 trillion. So 20 trillion US dollar is produced in the market. What BEA did in the last few years is now they publish also the amounts of goods and services that is produced inside home. Okay? So if I take that ratio, what do we find? Shocking big number. So in 1945, as US economy is producing 100 output in the market, home produced 45. So that's substantial. So that's telling you that compared to many sectors in the US economy, the whole of finance sector is only 20%. And the whole of professional service is only 13, and the whole of manufacturing is only 10. But home sector in 2020 is 20%. That tells you how substantial is this home production. It's big. And most interestingly, what happened during the COVID era? Do you see this jump here? So home production was falling relative to GDP, but then market shut down. No restaurant, nothing. You even have to bake your own bread. We see home production jump. It jumped by 3 percentage points. And that is equivalent to $0.6 trillion. Okay? So it's a very important sector of the economy. Okay? So that's why outsourcing to the market is very important both for economic value and also for the gender division of work. So the last part of my talk, I just wanted to give some food for thought, how I think about the Gen Z, okay? So I wanted to have a closer look at young women and men, how they spend their time. What we see is the division of work still present, even among 25 to 34 and among 18 to 24. Okay, I'm going to show you some number. And you know, there's some good news, meaning that the division is less pronounced for the more educated group. So here are two pictures here. So I can only get the US time use survey in such detail. I'm sure there are other countries, but for this talk, I focus on the United States. And if you remember, United States is already quite progress in terms of the division of work from my previous picture. So this is for the young women and men. This is for the overall population from age 25 or above. What I want you to highlight is this black color and the blue color. Black color is the hours they work in the market. Okay, the y-axis is percentage of time, okay? So 55% of the time they spend on leisure and work. The other 45% is just personal care and sleeping. Okay, so the same height of men and women here, basically saying that they spend about same time doing personal care and sleeping. Okay, women tend to do a little bit more in terms of personal care. Okay, but other than that, they are very similar. But the distribution, though, is very different. The black color is much bigger for men than for women. So what compensated? Where did women spend their time then? They spend their time on household work and childcare. And this is true for all levels of education, whether you have a degree or you don't have a degree. Women are still spending more time on childcare and household care. And these are for young people. And it's not much different for the overall generation. So it's telling you that, you know, they're still there. You know, even these women, remember, these are US women, they are already more educated than men. Okay? These are young women. We remember the gap. We see the education gap. Women is more educated than men. And yet still, the division of the work is still there. Then what about even younger? Okay? So I'm going to look to now 18 to 24. The even younger Gen Z. And what we see is, I think this is mentioned also yesterday during the talk about artificial intelligence, about the importance of STEM subject. What we see is there's a substantial gender gap in taking up the STEM subject. Okay? And also, for those who are not in education, they spend much less time looking for job, the women. Okay, so let's see the picture. So these are the STEM subjects in 2015 and 2022. Okay, each dot represents how much less likely women would do a STEM subject when they enter the university. So all these are new entrants. They are younger generation. What you see is the highest line is minus 10%. So that means in all countries, women are at least 10% less likely to take a subject that is in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Okay? There is a little bit improvement, meaning that the orange line is above the blue line. The orange dot is above the blue dot. So now women are entering into the STEM subject a little bit better, but still is quite, very much below. So the question we have to think about is, why? Why doesn't women want to do STEM subject? Now there could be many things. Okay, you could say gender norm. When I was young, when I was in high school, I wanted to do physics. My physics teacher told me, oh, girls should not do physics. Okay? I hope it has changed because it's a whole generation now. So it could be that. It could be, there's some gender norm. But it could also be the woman choose not to do it. And why do they choose that? Well, we think about education is for return to education. So if for some reason, as economists, we're always thinking about people are forward-looking. If you're forward-looking and you think of your future career, you're not devoting so much time. So if the STEM subject profession require longer hours, more rigid timetable, lacks flexibility, that could explain why. Okay? So earlier session, we talk about diversity, meaning we want creativity to come from different people. Surely that include creativity of men and women. So these are the things we have to think about. So what is happening in the labor market could be the reason why when this generation, when they choose a subject, they don't choose STEM subject. And it's substantial. The OECD's average is minus 26 percentage point. And it hasn't changed very much over time. Okay? And now I turn to people who are not in education, employment, or training. Okay, so these are called needs. Okay? So OECD average is about 13% of men and 14% of women, they are in need. Okay? So they are not doing employment or training or education. And out of that, we see that when women are in need, 70% of them are not looking for jobs compared to 56% of men. So what are they doing? When you look at the age 18 to 24, and they are not in employment, education, or training, again, you see this blue color standing out. So there's a recent economic paper talking about how video game had changed young men. And that you can sort of see in this red color. It turned into leisure. So women, for some reason, were not doing the same video game. They were actually doing more home production and childcare. Okay? And it's also for all type of education, all level of education. They search more for job for highly educated, but still women do much more home production compared to men. So let me conclude, with 2-3 slides on policy and gender norm. Okay? So first of all, on policy, there's one, very talk about policy, which is basically family policy, care spending, how government, help family with their care responsibility. As I mentioned, the Scandinavian countries started it in 1990s. So after 3 decades, we saw in earlier figure, they're the one with the most equal division of work in family, in homework, and in market work. So this kind of policy, could have an impact. Now, a lot of economic research paper, they sometimes have inconclusive results. And very often it's because they don't have long enough time to examine the impact of policy. If you only examine the impact of policy within a few years, of course you're not going to find big change. Because what this change, it can change how women choose what occupation, what subject to study, and many other into the future. And if you think about the other factor, it could be gender norm, okay? Which is what we stand out on the right-hand side of that figure, where, for every 1 hour men do, women do about 4 hours. And Korea, Japan, and Turkey, they stand out. So this is a picture on the government spending on caring, and you can see a very clear negative correlation between countries that spend more and the inactivity of women. Okay, so if they spend more on the primary care, and you see these are the Sweden, Norway, and Scandinavian countries. Here's Sweden, Finland, and Norway. They are done here. So they have very few inactive women, meaning women who are not in labor force, and they spend quite a lot. About gender norms, so this is my closing topic. So remember previously, I showed you a survey that asked, do you agree a woman should work if she wants to? And we say in the world, 80% men and women say yes. And in developed country, in OECD country, almost 100% yes. Okay? That was the answer, right? So, but now the question is a little bit different. Now it's not saying if you want to work, should you work? Now it's saying that if there's a job, and job is scarce, do you think men have more right to a job than women? Agree? Disagree? Indifferent? Okay? So let's see what they answer. Okay, I plot you both disagree and agree because there are people who say they are neither, okay? Maybe they don't want to express, okay? So that's why I plot you both agree and disagree. And you can say that country that agree up here is the same as country who disagree up down there. So most of the country that we are familiar with, they will say we disagree, okay? Men should not have priority to the job, okay? But just look at the amounts that say agree. It's an astonishing number. You see these numbers like 70%, 60%, and here's Korea. 50% of men and women in Korea will say that if the job is scarce, men has more right to the job. 50%. Despite they have 76% of young women who has a college degree. Okay? So that is quite shocking. Okay? Now, I now plot you the number of the same country we see earlier on with their ranking, remember, according to how educated are the young women. So Korea and Japan really stand out, and together with Turkey. So these are the places with very strong gender norm. Even though they agree, if a woman wants to work, they can work. But if there's a job, men should have more rights to the job than women. Very, very strong gender norm. And you can see that even in the very other, we think of more, equal country, still the percentage does not go above 90%. Okay? And what is worrying in Korea is, if you compare the number in 2017 versus 2010, it actually got worse. That is really worrying. With their women increasing their education by so much, the attitude toward women working actually become worse. So that is a very, very surprising thing. So this is my last slide. I wanted to, just step back and think about it. How should we look into the future? Okay? Fertility is falling. The United Nations predicts zero population growth by 2100. Korea is the most educated young woman. They have the most educated young woman. And they also have the lowest fertility. Okay? The government tried very hard. They give cash to women for them to have children. No, thank you. We don't want your money. Okay? So, not working. And some, crazy thing I heard Korean telling me, and they say, oh, the only way to solve it is not let women have education. That's the crazy thing I heard. Okay? Because they cannot find a solution. They don't know what to do. So the concern about low fertility is all over the world, because in Italy, in Greece, you have the same problem. Okay? You think about aging. What do we do with the aging population? What do we do with pension? And we have Professor Charles Jones here who talk about innovation. Okay? The end of economic growth. So in his work, he basically showed when people have children, they don't think about the positive externality or positive benefit the children might bring to the world. You never know. Maybe you produce an Einstein, Marie Curie. You never know. When you are deciding whether to have children, you only think about how much I want the children, how am I going to look after the children. You don't think about what that child could bring to the society. So in his work, he pointed out if we don't act early enough, then we will end up into this state called the empty planet. Okay? We will have to rely on artificial intelligence. There's no more human brain. Okay? So it's a very burning issue. Increasing fertility is going to be very difficult because we are the one who has to carry the baby. So if the challenge for this young woman about family and work cannot be solved, it's going to be very difficult. to solve this problem. Okay? Policy that help to address this balance is going to have far-reaching effect. Okay? And marketization, I think, is very important, as we see in the historical pattern of the US. As women home production go down, their market will go up. And this marketization can rely on technology, like more household durable. My son was telling me that he's going to invent a robot that does all the household work for me. Infrastructure, okay? In many African countries, you can't even have access to water and utility. That make home production very difficult. They have to collect wood, they have to collect water. Regulation and social norm, all these are very important for whether marketization can happen. But the good news is we see that gender norm can change. We saw the picture of the United States. In 1960, they were just like Korea. Okay? The ratio of home hour done by woman to man was almost 4. And it dropped. So that is the positive message I want to leave for you. But I think it's a joint effort for the young and the old. For us as a parents, how we teach our child about the gender role, okay? How that men and women can pursue what they are good at based on their ability and not their gender. And as a society, since we are in this transition path, policy can help to give a push, okay? Because we've seen in the Scandinavian country, since the 1990s, when they implement those policies, what changes it has brought to the equalization of division of work, okay? And that is not just about gender, it's about overall economic growth, overall society, how to solve one of the hardest problems now, which is the fertility problem. Okay? So I will end my talk here and I will answer questions. Yeah, so I will take this one.
Grazie mille. Thank you very much, Professor. So I guess there are different questions from the audience considering this hot topic. So we've got quite enough time, something like 10, 13 minutes. So please don't hesitate to ask your questions.
Thank you for your talk. It was very interesting, and if I may say, congratulations for the charts you showed, because they are by far the best charts we've seen so far. Maybe some of your male other speaker could learn from you. They were very well done.
The maker is there.
But besides that, the question is, when presenting policies to address the gender gap, you seem to imagine only kind of top-down policies. So there was subsidies, taxations, regulations. So I was wondering whether we might imagine some kind of other not state-driven policies to act. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess, this is a question, as I mentioned, it's not just from the government top-down will work, and there's a lot of implementation problem. For example, in the UK in 2023, they started this 30 hours free childcare for any children under age 5. And when it come out, the policy, in the autumn, in the spring statement, it say bring women back to work. That was the objective. When it bring out, it actually, have a lot of discussion. And people worry about how do we implement it, where do we have this childcare center, where do we have the people to come and work for it. So you are very right, just for the government to say, oh, we want to do this, it might not happen immediately. It really takes time. And I think, from, the idea of bottom up, I think is what I mentioned about from the family. So if within the family, we could, start to, educate our children, about this equality, about you should choose what kind of work you do based on your ability and preferences, rather than just based on your gender, then that can work together with the government's policy together. So I think that is the way I wanted to highlight. It cannot work just from top down, because it will be implementation-led, whereas the money is going to come from, it will go through the debate and many things. But as a society, I think, for me, it just blew up my mind why 76% of Korean women have a degree, and yet 50% say, if there's a job, a man has more right than woman. So it just blew up my mind. We keep having these, we send these girls education, we tell them, if you have a daughter, I suppose this is what you tell your daughter, try your best, you can be whoever you want to be. And then they grow up and then they say, oh, now I cannot because I have a family I have to look after. So I think it's a joint effort, not just from the government, but from the whole society. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. So congratulations, the lecture was excellent. So unfortunately, my partner is here, so at home production, Stefania will give me hard times. So that's, I'm not too happy. Now, two things. On the gender norms, there was these amazing things. Is it the answer by gender the same? One in South Korea on the agree and disagree. And the second question is that on the marketization, so there is this dramatic fall. Do you have evidence or envisage also a total recent fall in the number of hours, total hours worked, so that leisure goes up?
So, okay, on the gender norm thing, oh, I cannot show you the slide. On the gender norm thing, easy. So I actually did not look if they actually provide the data by gender. Yeah, that's a good question. It might be different. These are all putting together men and women. On the marketization figure, I do, show is this hours picture. Okay, so output has come down for home production, so is hours. So if you look at the drop in women's hour, which is the orange line, it dropped quite substantially from about 37 hours to about 27 hours. So 20 hours less home production by women. Now, what's nice is men actually chip in, okay? The men's home production hour increased from 10 to about 17. So there's a 7-hour increase for men and 20 hours decrease for women. Where did that 13 hours gone? I would say the 13 hours gone into the household appliance and also restaurant and outside, in the market. So leisure has gone up a bit since 1960. So, and the most increase for leisure is for the less educated group. The most educated group, actually, the leisure did not change as much. So I have a paper in the journal Economic Growth that talk about dispersion of leisure. But leisure did go up a bit, yeah. So yeah, people enjoy, from a welfare perspective, these, marketization and household appliance, they also work through that channel, release people's time from all this home production. Yeah.
Thank you. If I may ask, since you said that traditional gender norms can change throughout history, and that the role of gender norms is still relevant even in developed countries to explain child penalty and the gender gap in terms of wages. Since nowadays there is a greater debate in terms of traditional gender norms, there are even figures promoting like the role of a traditional wives, even social media. Do you think there might be a risk of a stagnation or even a reversal in terms of this progress for women?
I do think so. And in fact, when I know that I have to give this talk, I teach first year undergraduate macro. So all my students are Gen Z. So I told them, I have to give this talk. Since you are Gen Z, tell me what is your concern. And one of the concerns is exactly what you are saying, that a lot of Gen Z women feel like there's a reversal in terms of women back to the traditional role. You know, it's hard for me to say much. I am not a political scientist. I don't know why our society have to go back in that, despite we keep educating women. You see, that's where I find the inconsistency. You see, in a way, in the very old days, 100, 200 years ago, when we only teach women how to cook, how to do embroidery, you know, they just think about that, okay? People, women that is special, they're really special. They really are different from all the rest, and they become very successful. But 90% of women are, you know, happy go along. You know, this is what I learned, and I have to do all this household work, so I fit into that role. What I find most disturbing is now most parents, they teach their daughters, you can be anyone. They invest loads into the children. And then when they grow up, you see this chart. So I am very concerned, but I don't know what would be the solution. I think it has to be the mass. Everyone has to pick up the fight, okay? And then, you know, do it, yeah.
Thanks, Rachel. Great talk. I was wondering on slide 26, if I understood your chart correctly. So things, home production changed more between 1965 to 1985 than in the 4 decades that followed. So are things changing too slowly? Thanks.
Yeah, I think the main reason, this is also related to another recent work by Doug Gollin and his team, where they put together time use study for more than 100 countries. So they decompose home production into childcare or caring and household production. And what they see is along the development path, household production, meaning cooking, cleaning, you know, those kind of things, actually decline as the development happen. But childcare and, you know, caring is very slow. It's very constant. So this is my thinking. I don't have the picture here, but I do have a paper in the journal Economic Perspective where I have different components of home production of the United States since 1920s and comparing it to African country. And there you can see that those other things, like you can use a household appliance or you can hire someone to do it. But for childcare and caring, you know, it's almost like, first, technology is not that advanced for those things. And second, maybe it's not that easy, not that cheap to hire someone to do the caring for you. Like nowadays, nanny, they are quite a sophisticated profession. You know, my last nanny has a psychology degree. So she is really good. She was excellent. You know, I produced a very good boy for me. You know, she was amazing. So I'm saying that I think the slowdown is the remaining activity at home are very much to do with caring, and it was not that easy. You know, either we have to think of better technology, better institution, you know, to make people feel happy, you know, whether it's elderly home or nursery, to be good quality. When I talk to Korean women, you know, when I visited Seoul National University, there was only 2 female faculty, the whole department, all men, just 2 women. And when I asked them, you know, oh, do you have children? No. Do you want to have children? Yes, I want, but it's not possible. Because they know that once they have children, they will not be able to do the amount of work they want. And one of the concerns they have is there's just not that many reliable childcare centers they can actually send their children to. So that, you know, could be linked back to what the government level can do. Because if there is a better coordination, you know, the market, like the Adam Smith say, that specialization, you could replicate what is done at home better with more specialists. If that work, you know, then that could help. But this slow-moving graph, I think, is related to that pattern across country, is that some of the item is just very difficult. Yeah. In fact, you know, there's a paper by Valerie Raimi called The Rat Race. They were saying that for highly educated women, since the 2000, childcare time actually gone up because they help children preparing for the college entrance exam and everything. So there is also those components, how easy to outsource those things.
So thank you very much for a very inspiring talk. And I was just following up from the question on trad wives, if there could be a reversal again. And you know, one of the topics of this festival is also mental well-being of young people and adolescents. And one of the things is that it could explain part of the kind of reversal. Women got educated, but as you've shown, they don't really manage in the marketplace as men. They earn less, they are less employed, so they face personal problem, and therefore adolescents also, they kind of discount that in the labor market they'll face these difficulties. Particularly girls suffer much more than boys during teenagerhood. And that is also, of course, an indication of some type of problems that you can then have a reversal of this trend later on.
Yeah, no, you know, that's this sort of anxiety, you know, what do I get this education for? And what do I look into the future? It is something that I'm very worried. And I think it's a joint effort, not just from, you know, policy, it's also from the public. You know, policy, like if we look at, like one of the biggest change for the gender gap in the United States, that we were looking at how the gender wage gap finally trying to narrow since the 1960s and 70s, is a series of labor law, you know, that was actively introduced in the United States to help that. But something that is sad is, in Korea in 1980s, the Department of Labor, they also tried to do the similar things, okay, about, you know, anti-discrimination, all this kind of thing. But Korea still have the highest gender wage gap in the OECD country, you know, advanced country of the similar. So it's something that, you know, it worked together. That's why I don't want to just talk about policy or just gender norm. Somehow I think they work together. One push the other push the other. And that sort of fit into younger generation, which is why I was saying, why don't they choose the STEM subject? You know, is it really true by nature women are less good in STEM subject? I don't think so. I think it's something very, you know, fabricated into our society, and it needs change, and things has to work together. Yeah, so my hope is that both the policy side, whether it is about care, you know, helping the care sector, or the labor law for more equality, and also the society in terms of general education. How do we teach children about the gender role? I think it's very important. I think it should be agender in the sense, you know, each person are different. For each gender, there's a distribution. There are many women who's good in STEM. It's the same as there are many men who's very good in poetry, in other things. There are men who cook very well, and there's also, you know, so I think we should remove that gender thing and just think about the individual, their preference and their ability, what will make them happy. And that will ease their stress rather than fixing a, you know, a hat on them.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Sorry, we have to conclude. We have no more room for questions, but thank you very much for coming along.